So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our conversation series. My name is Adrian Devenyi, and I'm a board member of Alianta, which is an NGO that was founded by two former US ambassadors to Romania, Mark Gittenstein and James Rosa Pepe. As the name shows, Alianța means alliance in Romanian. The purpose of this NGO is to foster closer ties between the United States and Romania across a wide range of fields, from investments to diplomatic ties to cultural, educational, and so on. Today we're talking about venture capital investments in Romania, and we're honored to have two very distinguished guests participating. For those of you that know the space, our guests don't need any introduction, but for those of you less familiar with Romania, I will introduce Radu Georgescu, who is one of the most prominent entrepreneurs and venture capitalists in Eastern Europe. Radu founded Gecad Ventures in 1992, very early days, and really put Romania on the IT map with the sale in 2003 of his RAV antivirus software company to Microsoft. Since then, he has had several successful exits, both to foreign acquirers and domestic acquirers, and is now actively investing in Romania and abroad in early stage startups, having mostly transitioned from a serial entrepreneur to an active venture capitalist. But I will let Radu describe his activities in more detail. We also have Dan Lupu, who is a partner at Earlybird Capital, which is a global venture capital firm. Dan was one of the early backers of the Romanian-founded Unipath, which is a robotic process automation, really a software robot that is has been extremely successful, and in fact was recently listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and this morning had a market capitalization of $29 billion. Really an amazing investment story, and I'm sure Dan will tell us a little bit about that experience. I will just give a very, very high-level description of the investment in Romania space. As reported by the National Bank of Romania for 2019, which is the last year before the pandemic, the foreign direct investment inflows to Romania were 5 billion euros, which is a respectable number. The total stock of foreign direct investment, so the accumulated number of investments minus the divestments, was 88 billion euros, which is an increase of 9% over 2018, the prior year, and 72% higher than the stock in 2010. So clear progress. To put it in perspective relative to the size of Romania, the total stock of FDI amounts to 4,500 euros per resident. And 17% of that stock is in information and communications technology. So the space where Radu and Dan are active is clearly one of the primary destinations for these foreign investments. In terms of the perception of Romania for foreign investors, the World Bank ranking of ease of doing business places Romania at a solid 55 place in the world, which is 3 spots better than Hungary, 3 spots worse than Hungary, and 5 spots better than Bulgaria, to compare with some of our neighbors. Although I have to admit, I'm not a big fan of these rankings as they're very subjective, but just to get a sense of Romania's perception to the outside world. So 55 out of about 200 countries listed. Likewise, corruption perception index, the corruption perception index, which is published by Transparency International, another NGO, places Romania in the 69th position in the world, tied with Hungary and Bulgaria. So, improving, but not great perception. On the positive side, Romania is also an emerging market since last year, That's a ranking that Morgan Stanley Capital published. It's an index that Romania gained access to, and it was upgraded from a frontier market prior to last year. This is really something that affects more capital market investments. So this is the very, very broad description of Romania's progress. Obviously, for some of this progress, our guests were personally responsible and contributed to. So we'll kick off our conversation with asking a very general question. Namely, what sectors and subsectors do you find particularly interesting today? What sectors are you invested in and looking to get more invested in? Do you want to start, Radu?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. It's always very nice to get you connected to my friends in the US and to the US community. So thank you so much for having me here. To answer a little bit kind of with what I believe and what we're looking at both in Gecad Ventures and Seedlink, is that we believe that we're living now in a world that changes a lot from global to regionals, and the geopolitics is influencing a lot the technology world. So whereas 30 years ago the internet was focused towards a global world, a global internet, and unifying the world, right now all the geopolitics in the world and everything divides the globality into China, Russia, Europe, US, and the rest of the world, including this US and Europe kind of divide specifically in technology. And we can see that Europe is actually understanding right now that it lacks technology, and it relies on US technology, and then all this kind of investing in European startups, pushing a lot of money into European technology, all this GDPR that does not allow European companies to move data into the US, and all this kind of thing. It's actually changing the internet and technology from a global unifying power into more regional entities. So ending up with what we are looking for, we are looking at technologies to actually support this thing. We are looking at local infrastructure, being it software, hardware, or whatever. We are looking at security, and we're looking at fintech. These are actually the things that we believe are going to get a lot of power because this directions. Of course, everything that goes into people working less, all the robots, all the AI into the right direction. And I'm not speaking about the hype AI, but the real working AI or ML. So basically that's where Gecad Ventures is looking at, and that's actually what Seedlink is mainly looking at in early stages.
Dan, what does it look like from your perspective?
We are a regional investor, and we have our mandate defined broadly as investors in ICT. More specifically, we are looking at two things. One is B2B software, and defined broadly, and deep tech. Thank you.
It's interesting what you just said about the world becoming more regional and less global. That sort of like goes against the second law of thermodynamics to some extent. But it's certainly a trend that we observed. Do you think it's a consequence of the pandemic, partly of the geopolitical situation with a lot more populist rhetoric on both sides of the Atlantic, or do you think it's a consequence of the sort of it's a retreat from the earlier perhaps too wide globalization trends?
It's a trend that we've seen at least for 10 years now. And it is both a combination of geopolitics kind of power movement, as well as a rebound of, it's in the cycles. I mean, it's been all the 69 flower power global world post-war and so on, where everybody were friends with everybody. Now it got to the other side, where more populistic, nationalistic, it's coming.
Right. Remains to be seen how this evolves over the next few decades. But does that create an opportunity where, for example, instead of most people in Romania shopping on Amazon.com, there could be room for perhaps there is already a Romanian e-commerce leader, but there could be room for Amazon-like companies in Romania, for example, Latin America. There is such a competitor to Amazon that's very successful. Could one replicate some of the global giants, the FANGs locally and have successful businesses?
My only comment is that it should not be, it will not, the answer is yes, but not Romanian, but European. Okay. So I don't think it's a local play, it's a regional play. So I think that the region is Europe.
Understood. Dan, what verticals and spaces, you mentioned ICT, obviously that's your mandate, but more specifically, what spaces do you find particularly interesting today, both in terms of activity and in terms of capital being attracted to them?
I mean, in our line of business, again, we are investing mostly in B2B software and deep tech. We have a regional mandate, so we are not focused necessarily in Romania. By chance, we made more investments in Romania than in any other country in the region. But what we find out is that the markets, we have to be generalist investors because the markets are rather shallow. So we cannot really find 5 companies in a sector to be able to specialize or have sector teams when you look at investments. And moreover, if we look at our history, most of the companies where we were successful in investing did not exist as a theme at the time of our forming of the fund. And in many cases, it's also rather ironic that companies that shouldn't exist in the region are emerging from the region, and this somehow defines what we see interesting in the region. But I think that there's no general upwing trend. It's more like waves. A couple of years, Bulgaria, it's up the wave. Maybe then Romania follows for 6 months, and then Poland or Hungary, and that's a general trend, and that's why we are happy to have a regional mandate.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. This actually brings me to the next question, which is when you are sourcing investments, you approach it top down, meaning searching in a particular vertical or a particular business, or more bottom up based on the quality of the team and the quality of the idea or product?
We rarely approach it top down. If you want, we have the top down negative approach. So we would not do e-commerce in the region. We wouldn't do consumer in the region. We did consumer, but only in Turkey, which is a market big enough to generate the companies of the size that we need in order to make it a successful investment.
Right. Let's talk a bit about valuations. How do valuations in Romania compare to comparable opportunities in the region, in Europe in general, or even worldwide in other emerging markets? And are those valuations enough or to compensate for the idiosyncratic Romania risks that we can talk about a bit later?
We invest in global companies, and they have to have a global outlook from day one.
Right.
So in general, there's no Romania discount, if you want. Global companies can attract global capital. And we've seen companies raising at incredible valuations based on access to foreign capital. And that's a general trend. Whenever you get noticed, there's a lot more competition than it used to be 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Right. Radu, I know you invest in not only but you're a big investor in locally grown startups. How do valuations compare to developed and other developing markets?
I completely concur with Dan. Entrepreneurs are looking around and they have access to capital. Romanian capital and Romanian investments need to match whatever is available somewhere else. And a good fund and a good investor knows that whenever you pay a discount, you get discounted merchandise. So it's not nobody would. I mean, nobody who's not stupid would not rather get something cheap and just look for better companies.
Right. I guess the question is, there are more sources of capital looking at Romania as we saw in the headline numbers, and as the investment process is democratized, and we'll talk in a minute about SeedBlink that Radu is very involved with. Is it harder to, obviously when you go to a company that's looking for €500,000 and is 5 guys in a garage or 5 guys in an apartment in Bucharest, you can pretty much drive the bargain. Are you saying that it's these days those 5 guys in an apartment in Bucharest are courted by by Silicon Valley or London or by dance fund, so it's harder to get an attractive deal done?
If they most probably if they are smart, they wouldn't be looking for $500,000. They would be looking for 2 to 5 million, and they would get noticed. Sure,
but that was not possible 10 years ago, right?
Most probably not.
Okay.
But yeah, the environment changed. There are now local funds which were not active 5 years ago. There's a lot more presence of large guys, including with the scouting programs, which have a presence in Romania. Yeah. Things evolve, and obviously there's better access to capital.
Right. Is that a good thing? Kind of like more attention and more, even if that drives valuations up, is that better for your business because it makes it easier to exit? Like you'd rather pay, as Radu was saying, you'd rather pay a 10% premium to what would have been a valuation a few years ago, but you can get even better on the exit? I'm not sure if I was clear.
So. No, I think first of all, I don't think that the increase in valuation is 10%. I think we are talking about orders of magnitude. We are not talking percentages. And that's why I actually disagree with the idea that for good companies you need to pay up, because the level of paying up that people thought when they came up with this saying was in the order of percentages, as you said. But now you are paying orders of magnitude higher valuations, and there I don't think it's a good thing, neither for the businesses nor for the investors.
Okay, so the wall of cash that's essentially crashing over the markets in general, which has driven valuations higher, you think gives you some concern about?
Yes, it does, and we've seen the thing is that this is mainly driven by the global availability of cash.
Right.
and this can dry up very quickly. When we started in 2012, Turkey was very hot. Everybody was in Turkey. Everybody wanted to invest in Turkey. Index, Axel, Sequoia were in Istanbul every week. 2 years later, nobody wanted to touch Turkey.
Certainly, the politics, Erdogan and the Turkish politics have a lot to do with that. But
exactly, but that's the wrong approach. Like I don't like the politics of in Romania, but I'm not saying I don't invest in Romania. Most of these things that we invest in are totally disconnected from the local markets, and are unaffected by politics. We don't do business with public entities. That's true that we can get affected by regulation, and it happened to us. But I mean, that's learning.
Sure. Radu, you are very involved. You're on the board of this company, Seedlink, which looks to democratize venture capital investments and open the field to smaller investors and a wider range. Are you also an investor in Seedlink? Can you tell us a bit about this company for, perhaps some of our audience may be interested to learn about them as a way to invest in Romania?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for asking. I'm one of the 4 co-founders and an investor in every round in Seedlink, and chairman of the board. That's actually a company and the way of investment that it's very important for the environment. It targets to the European community, both on the startups and on the investors. And it aims to actually give the everyday investor the tools to behave as a professional VC, right? So we're giving the tools for the investors to create a thesis and to create a portfolio and to manage a portfolio and to then exit, whenever the opportunity arises from companies of their portfolio. And we're giving them a lot of tools like, the ability to follow on and so on. So it's not your normal equity crowdfunding. It's a different kind of equity crowdfunding that goes closer to a VC to create your very small personal VC-like portfolio and tools to be able to invest. And it's very fancy and it's very cool. So we have a very good business in Romania. We just raised our Series A and our own Series A, right? Which was partially from VC, partially from angels, and partially from the platform itself. And now we are trying to consolidate an European market that's both M&A consolidation as well as greenfield opening in Europe. It's very very hard and very interesting and very challenging to be able, because Europe is actually not one country and one culture, as you all know. I mean, it's very challenging to be able to go and sell something that is pretty soft in so many cultures, but it's amazingly interesting, intellectually challenging, and powerful whenever results are coming. Out of 37 companies that I've started, I have to say that Seedlink is the one that in the first year of life grew the most out of all my my startups. And of course, that's not a guarantee for future success, but it's very, very nice.
Oh, that's congratulations for that. What would be the equivalent in the United States or Western Europe of this crowdfunding platform?
I guess the Israeli Our Crowd is something that we are looking up to. That's probably the closest.
Right. Okay. And we're mentioning that there is no Romania discount anymore. How do you mitigate some of the Romania-specific risks? Like, as I was mentioning before, the perception in the West is that the legal system might not be as investor friendly as in the West. When you write your investment contracts, what law do you write your term sheet under? Do you write them under English law, under New York law? Is that a consideration for you, kind of the legal framework that you invest under?
Sure. We never do anything under Romanian law. We never invest in Romanian entities.
Right. So they have to form a shell outside.
Yes, exactly.
Which is, what is the most, I know we have a few lawyers in the audience. What is the most typical law that governs your investment contracts?
It depends. We either create Netherlands-based entities or SPVs or US Delaware C Corp. Okay,
right. And both of you have had tremendous success investing and with exits. Give us an example of investment that didn't go quite as well, and perhaps that there's a lesson there, whether Romania specific or not. But just as a war
Romania
story.
Specific. Romania
Sure.
Specific.
Please.
T-Job. We invested in T-Jobs. I think it was our first investment in Romania. They had a model where they were building a platform around recruiting blue-collar workers in the region, sending them to for temporary jobs in Western Europe. And there was a very specific treatment, fiscal treatment of how you pay the per diem. Right. There's a clear law in Romania saying that you have to pay per diem. And there's another very clear law that says you have to, the per diem is tax-free. Stupid Romanian government under political pressure comes and says, look, we know that there is this law, but we actually choose to interpret the law differently. And we fine you all for not taxing the per diems. And this basically killed the model. And I'm not talking about us, we lost 3 million, but in the context of a fund, that's a loss that we could assume. Yeah. But I think it just shows that the Romanian government in its interpretation can be very arbitrary. We actually identified this as a potential risk when we made the investment initially. Sure. And we had a written legal opinion saying that the treatment is legally correct. But the government...
Right. And just as a follow-up, were you able to recover any of your, would you able to litigate the issue, or were you able to
litigate where? In Romanian courts?
But your investment was with a non-Romanian entity under foreign law. So yeah. Of course there was not probably much to recover from the founders, or of course not from the government. But anyway, so it was a complete.
Look, the government came afterwards and said, look, we are gonna pass an amnesty, and all the fines will be forgiven, but don't do that anymore. In the meantime, a couple of companies went under and could not recover because of the fines. But that's just doing business in Romania, and it was the only time when we had any exposure to the Romanian legal system or Romanian market. So one time, one failure.
So caveat emptor. Radu, do you have a war story about a less successful investment that sort of taught you a lesson?
Look, I was telling that I started 37 companies and invested in other about 15, all in all, there were 6 huge successes, other 10 that I didn't lose all the money, and all the others are great stories and amazing lessons. Don't get me started. I mean, luckily for me, and funnily, I did not have the Romanian specific lessons and failures. But otherwise, all kind of lessons. I can write a ton of books on that.
Maybe you should one day. But 6 out of 37 is actually a very, very good batting average for a VC fund. So it's it's a probability game, and of course,
It's a statistics game. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and as Dan was saying, when you have a success that's orders of magnitude. So if you get 100x, that compensates.
Having said this, kudos to Dan. I never had something like UiPath, so I guess congratulations for that. That's actually amazing.
Actually, on that point, thank you for the segue to the next question. Dan, when you first invested in UiPath, I think it was 2015, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's correct.
Was it already a global company, or was it a mostly Romania-focused company?
It was mostly a 12-person startup on De La Veche.
Right. So you saw the potential as a global company, but it was not global yet.
Yeah, but I mean, don't assume that I saw the global potential and the 30 billion in market cap. I looked at my investment paper and I said that they could get to $400 to $500 million in valuation.
Of course. No, the success, and again, I said Radu's sale to Microsoft in 2003 put Romania on the map, but UiPath put Romania on the cover of Forbes magazine, and it really has focused attention on Romania and the quality of the research and entrepreneurs there. But UiPath has recently listed, and the capital markets are a pretty tough arbiter. It's you're subject to daily scrutiny, certainly quarterly results. It's not a slam dunk. Of course, you generate value when you list, and the early investors may have a nice exit. But from then on, for the company and its shareholders, it's a daily evaluation by the markets. And in fact, UiPath, after a very successful IPO, is down 40% from its recent peak. So on that point, is an IPO, is a listing foreign, or even in the Romanian market, although liquidity is much poorer, is that the ultimate goal? There is a successful IT company, Bitdefender, in Romania, that hasn't chosen that path. Bitdefender, it's private, and it's growing organically. As a VC, do you always look for? I mean, ultimately, is the nirvana of VC investing a public listing, or would you ever consider going the Bitdefender way?
I mean, I don't know about Bitdefender because they didn't exit. If you talk about exits in general, IPO is one option. Usually it's the one that it's the least likely, but any exit through a trade sale or an M&A, it's as good as long as it produces the returns.
Right. But as an entrepreneur, Radu, would you obviously you've done a bunch of private sales, but is an IPO always a good thing for a company, providing?
Look, I think it's a matter of each company and each entrepreneur and each shareholders are rather having one or the other as a principle. In general, I mean, at the end of the day, you are looking at the returns. Whatever is good opportunistically for that company it's obviously what people are looking for. Me personally, I'm investing in way younger companies than Dan is actually staying. I'm very focused on the first couple of stages of the companies, and I'm a quick shooter for an exit or for a shutdown if it doesn't really work, right? So I'm trying to focus all my energies into growing companies and making them exit and building a bigger portfolio and work the numbers My personal strategy is basically in bigger numbers of projects and focus on the high growth ones rather than keep a couple of them and get them up.
More diversified, sure, makes sense. No discussion of this space would be complete today without a conversation about cryptocurrencies, the blockchain, decentralized finance, and so on. What I often hear from investors when addressing that question today is, look, I don't know what's going to happen to the value of the coins, Bitcoin, Ether, and so on. They may be a bubble, they may crash down to earth, but certainly blockchain is a technology that's here to stay, is a technology of the future. So at least from the blockchain perspective, it's something for the future. It's a bit of a hedge because, to my knowledge, there hasn't been a major success in the blockchain space yet. Perhaps with the notable exception of non-fungible tokens, which is in the art world the latest craze, where they create works of art that live on the blockchain and that are transacted and auctioned for remarkable sums of money, $20 to $100 million per NFT. But other than that, and certainly the large banks, JP Morgan's, the Goldman Sachs's of the world, they're also hedging their businesses by investing in fintech and blockchain and so on, which could be a hedge for their business. How do you view this space? I know that Radu is active in that space to some extent, and I know that you're not looking necessarily top down, but what is your personal view of investments in this space, in DeFi and crypto?
Yeah. So look, I think that blockchain is an amazing technology. It's something that, as an engineer, I love, but it's yet in search for a problem to solve. So will it find something to solve? Possible, but I cannot see such a thing as yet. Then Bitcoin in itself is some sort of an index for the blockchain technology, so for the sentiment of the blockchain technology. So I think it's not a coin like all the others. It's more like an index sentiment kind of a thing. And I guess there are a few other coins like Ethereum and maybe a couple of others that have something to do with the blockchain, and they're somewhere around. And then whatever the rest of shit coins, pardon my French, that has nothing to do than the Ponzi schemes in principle.
Right. Certainly the Ethereum, which is trying to, I guess, to make itself the most user-friendly blockchain for smart contracts. And there's a bunch of other networks, right? Cosmos and Polkadot, which are trying a similar thing to create user-friendly, to be the space for smart contracts. What about decentralized finance? It's very popular in the United States and Western Europe to some extent. Has it made its way to Romania?
No. Romanian authorities put their head in the sand and chose to ignore the phenomena, and I think that's the worst thing. I mean, you can say yes, no, maybe. You can say anything, but say something, for God's sake. So right now, all this is completely not taxed. It's completely ignored. Nobody knows whether the government's view is to treat it as assets or as currency or whatever. And there are so different options and alternatives and ways of handling things, if you know. And people want to be legal and pay taxes and everything, and they just don't know how to do it.
It's not considered an asset, so subject to 10% capital gains tax? No, okay. I mean, in defense of Romania,
it's not considered anything. And in a context where, as Dan was saying, you have a law and actually the government chooses to read it different. When you don't have a law, I mean, just imagine.
Yeah. Dan, you're not looking specifically at this space, right? Are you looking at anything in fintech more generally, or?
Yes, we did. We actually did invest in Fintech OS, which is quite a sizable company coming out of Romania with a lot of potential. We are not looking at, or I am not looking at cryptocurrencies, and I don't
have non-fungible tokens, NFTs, been on the radar in Romania, or not so much?
No, I think people didn't even hear of them.
Okay.
I mean, just a few guys that follow, Steph Curry buying one NFT or this kind of hearing, but I don't think that people even understand what's that.
Right. It's very much du jour in the United States, especially in the art world. I forgot to mention, if people have questions, please post them in the chat. Both I and everybody else will see your questions, and we'll leave the last 10 minutes for questions from the audience. Dan, you were saying that these days, in the way you plan your investments, looking for global companies that have no exposure to the government, the Romanian politics doesn't matter so much. We all know Romanian politics is very Balkanic. It's certainly for us, for those of us that grew up in Romania, brings to mind a dear a beloved playwright, Caragiale, that satirized the political scene at the beginning of the 20th century. So especially what's happening these days, with the current coalition, there's so much volatility and really Caragiale-like political acts. Are you pretty much insulated from the politics? Like if this PNL government, the center-right government, collapsed and you had a social democratic government, which is, I guess, left of center, would you care? Should foreign investors even care, or is that just noise and one should only look at the fundamentals of the business and knowing that it's going to be global anyway, and the exit is going to be outside anyway?
I care at a personal level that they are the same idiots as ever, but on a business level, most probably it's going to have zero impact. Right.
So you're able to construct your investment so that the exposure to government errors or government.
We have almost no exposure to the Romanian market, and we never do business with the government entities or government-owned companies.
Right. In terms of your recruiting and your personnel, Romania has a very deep bench of highly trained and very capable IT specialists, and certainly we saw it with Unipath and the companies that Radu founded. But on the other hand, you're looking to create global companies. Today, half the top executives at Unipath are non-Romanian. Do you first look in the Romanian recruiting market, or are you agnostic about where they come from, especially with the work from home scenario? Where do you look to recruit from? Certainly the founders are going to be centered in a location, Romania or another place. But when you're looking to grow the company, are you looking all over the world, or are you looking specifically in Romania or another country?
We are agnostic, and I think that this thing about the deep bench of technical talent is a bit overrated, because there's so much demand that it's very difficult to scale up past a certain size. It's almost impossible to scale only based in Romania.
Right. Is this deep bench getting thinner because either they find jobs abroad, or they contract virtually abroad, or they're just less interested? Is it harder to find a sort of good value among the Romanian technical workforce?
I mean, we can start speculating, but I have a particular view on this. But yeah. I think one of the reasons I have a particular view because I root for the product companies, not service companies. Yeah. But one of the reasons there's a shortage of good people in the market is, again, because of the idiotic policies of the Romanian governments, all political persuasions, which encouraged companies like Microsoft, Oracle, and so on to open so-called support centers, which took off 5,000, 3,000, 6,000 potentially good programmers and made them work for doing less than smart things.
I tend to disagree here, Dan, with all due respect. I think that the move in itself was a good move, bringing a lot of policies and the ability to create, middle management and product and, all the tools that were not in Romania. What was missing is, after that, getting those tools and deploying those tools in a little bit more helpful into the startups. So I think that the first step was actually good to bring all this knowledge that was missing. I mean, Romania was coming, all the shit that there was no product and no marketing and no middle management and everything. So they created this into IT, and that was really helpful. But then there a little bit of support to migrate this from the corporates to the startups, to the private world, and encourage the corporates to create more and more. That would have been helpful. I want to answer to the pool of the technical guys as well. Romania always was a country with very good software engineers, but kind of very little. It's more like Israeli rather than India, right? So very good quality, but little quantity. And now the COVID thing, the pandemics, actually did a very bad thing for Romania, because you can actually work from here anywhere in the world. So right now there is literally no advantage whatsoever for a company in Romania, because you can hire from all over the world, but the local Romanians can be hired all over the world. One very interesting thing that I've seen, and I'm seeing more and more, is more and more people are trying to double cross the company and actually get to work for two companies. Mm-hmm. And as people are working from home, programmers end up working for two companies. They work about 10 hours a day, basically 5 hours for each company, and claim they're working 8 hours. And that's double crossing, and that's bad. But I've seen this happening. I honestly have no clue how this is going to get resolved on a worldwide basis.
Well, Romanians are very hardworking people. Many of us work 30 hours a day and bill for it. So, and certainly very creative people. This may not be, a space that you're particularly investing in, but Romania traditionally also has very good healthcare, very good doctors. Is biotech a very active area, either from your own experience or other VCs? Is biotech also an active space in Romania?
I haven't seen it. I haven't heard of it, but I'm not looking for it either.
Right. Okay. Radu, do you know?
We've seen in Seedlink a few embryons, a few seeds of this. It's very early stage, but I think kind of it's going to come in the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Sure.
So get prepared, Dan, to look for them in the next 5 years.
Initially, I mistakenly thought that a company that Radu's invested in, Typing DNA, was actually a biotech, but obviously it's a security company with a very catchy name. Radu, you've had a foot in Silicon Valley for a long time, pretty much since 2003. Knowing what you know today, and knowing the Silicon Valley space very well, what would you do differently, knowing what you know today, if you were earlier in your career? Is that something that you think can be imported from Silicon Valley into Romania? Certainly Seedblink is possibly one of them, but other than that, in terms of corporate governance, in terms of risk aversion of entrepreneurs, in terms of just in general.
These are all theoretical, what you are saying, but I think every region has its own environment. That's a big puzzle. You cannot take one piece of the puzzle and move from Silicon Valley to. You cannot take Stanford and bring it to Romania. You cannot get the weather to bring it to Romania. You cannot get Sand Hill roads to bring it to Romania. So right. I guess Romania and Europe, for that matter, has to develop its own environment. And this environment, this European environment for startups and for technology and so on, is this Silicon Valley-like, or is it, looking differently? It has to look very European. It cannot copy Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley is a very specific, very particular place with very important characteristics.
Sure.
And look, everybody in the world wants to create the next Silicon Valley, Moscow, Berlin, Austin, whoever. There's no such thing as a second Silicon Valley. Each region has different. Boston is different than Silicon Valley, though very, very, very nice and very good.
Sure. Even New York, where I live, as Silicon Alley, where absolutely. So it's very region specific. We'll leave the last 7 minutes for questions, and please post your questions in the chat. We'll try to select some of these questions. There's a question that's asking to, and this is related to the last string of conversation we had. What is Romania missing compared to a European center for venture capital, like Berlin and Paris? I don't know that these are the most, maybe in the European Union, probably London is a more active center, but is there, if you were the government, is there anything that you would change or that you would recommend to them to make Romania a better place for VC investments?
Yeah, I have a very strong opinion about that, and excellent recommendation. Just
I hope Florin Câțu is listening.
Yeah, just stay the hell out of it.
Okay, right. But however, to Radu's earlier point about crypto and decentralized finance, regulation is needed and will come. So in that space, staying out of it creates confusion. Obviously, a government's reaction to crypto goes from the communist Chinese, no crypto, the communist government decides creates their own crypto, and don't you trade a single coin, to El Salvador, a small country in Central America that made Bitcoin one of its legal tenders without much effect on either the country or Bitcoin prices. So we're all over the map. At some point, regulation has to be implemented, at least taxation, or at least clarified. So the government does have to, in the United States as well, it's clear that it's not clear. The SEC is, vetoing some projects like ETFs and allowing others. Gary Gensler, who I used to work with at Goldman Sachs, is talking a big talk, but they haven't really done anything. Regulation is coming and has to be clarified. So,
but that's a very specific thing on the crypto. In principle, I think Dan is spot on.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And maybe there's another question here addressed to Dan. Could you just give us just in two minutes kind of the story of how the 15 guys at UiPath in 2015 became this big global company? How did you, as a member of their board and as advising them, see the great expansion opportunity? How did it become a global company to the extent it is today?
There was something related to the overall situation in the market, and which was very favorable, the market demand and the market structure. But I think if you look in perspective, everything had to do with Daniel's ability to transform himself from a small-time Romanian entrepreneur and engineer, a good engineer maybe, into the CEO of a global company. And there was nothing to recommend that at the time.
So serendipity and real vision on the part of Daniel and
capacity to reinvent himself.
Right, which is always important for founders. Were there opportunities to exit in a private sale before the IPO? Was that even considered?
I was fearing it. I was fearing it for a long time.
I'm sorry?
I was fearing that somebody will come and make an offer that we cannot refuse.
Yeah. Once the large, I think Kleiner Perkins was the large VC that got involved, if I'm not mistaken.
No, Axel led the Series A and Series B.
Okay. And once a large amount of foreign capital got involved, obviously things changed from all points of view. But obviously a challenge for an early investor is to not be diluted too much. Right. And that's a function of the size of the fund and valuations and so on. That's another challenge from Romania being much more visible in the West, right? How do you deal with that when you have Series B and C and follow-ons?
You hopefully you invest from a large enough pool of capital, and you keep a lot of money in reserves. We were able to lead Series Seed and continue to invest in Series A and B. So on exit, we were the second largest institutional investor on the cap table after Axel.
Right. Okay. That's remarkable. But by the way, have the Vision Fund
and you don't sell early.
Right. That's the hard part, right? Because
exactly.
The ability to follow on in good companies where nobody actually wants to allow new money and the old money so the contractual ability to follow on is one of the most important things that a VC does.
But it's somehow overrated, because you might have the contractual ability to do so.
Yeah.
But in the name of being a good investor and a good citizen, you end up not pushing the legal buttons.
Yeah, right. But at least you have a little bit of leeway there.
Yeah.
Are the Vision Fund and SoftBank and other very large sort of industrial scale VCs, are they even looking at Romania? Are they present? I know obviously Naspers is, because they bought one of Radu's companies, but what about the Goliath of the world, the VC world? Vision Fund.
Vision Fund looked at UiPath. It's a story that Daniel said several times. He told the story several times, and luckily for us, they decided to invest in automation anywhere.
Yeah, like WeWork, for example. Right. Other Radu, do you run into a lot of large? Obviously, you do early stage and seed, so probably you run less into them. But do you find that Did you run into them more than before? The large sleep.
Look, let's be very realistic about it. Large funds were present in Romania for a very, very long time. Back in 2007, I think, if not 2006, maybe 2006. Tiger made an investment in Romania.
Yeah.
Tiger Global, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Although they're a bit different than the Sand Hill Road guys, right? They're much more. They're a hedge fund basically, and they're much more aggressive. They're more
but the most active and the most successful technology investor outside of Warren Buffett.
Sure, absolutely. But it's slightly a different model than Sand Hill Road. Probably it's maybe more growth stage, but
no, I think
actually they did, in Romania they made almost a seed stage. I think they called it Series A, but it was a very, very early stage company. If I'm not mistaken, the valuation was something like 7 million. Anyway, way below 10 million at the time.
But it was a very strange investment, and it was the only one in any case.
Yeah.
So I guess the thing to be said here is that yes, they're all active. Yes, they have scouts. No, nobody of the big guys have an office or something formal, not even around Central Eastern Europe. So they do have scouts. They have eyes around and ears to listen, but it's a very soft kind of thing. And the Axels of the world and even upper are only reacting when something like Unipath is coming.
Right. So you essentially have to find the promising companies and that your companies, I mean, your funds, and that's I guess that's a good thing for your business. Well, we're at the top of the hour, and we're gonna end this conversation here. Thank you again, Radu and Dan, for your kind participation. It was very interesting.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
I will let Raluca and the transmission, and I know she has a general interest message. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, everybody. Just before we all leave, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to everyone, because we all know what Zoom fatigue we're all experiencing lately. And that's why I wanted to let everybody know that Alianta is planning to come back with a gala on November 18 in Washington, D.C. You can go to Alianta's website at alianta.org to purchase tickets, and we hope to see you there. I mean, we're very excited to have in-person events again. So
when is the gala, and where is it?
The gala is on November 18. And it will be followed on November 19 by the Alianta Summit with panel conversations on various subjects. And you can find the whole program on our website. So.
And where is it? Where does it take place?
It takes place at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington, D.C.
Okay. I hope we can travel by then.
I really hope so too. It looks like the travel restrictions are being lifted somewhat. So. Hope to see you everyone there, and thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.